Hello, this is Jessie Perryman, and welcome to this week's edition of the Flaghunter's Golf Podcast. This one's a great one, folks. I'm going to keep this intro short and simple. This podcast is with a man that I have a lot of respect for that has been a very deep influence in my golf life. His name is John Erickson. John is the founder of Advanced Ball Striking. He and Bradley Hughes have built the advancedballstriking.com website that has forums about just about anything that you can imagine in golf, but primarily it's centralized around the methodology that John has taught us, as well as Brad, and equipment and things like that. So we've got the founder of Advanced Ball Striking, John Erickson, and the reigning USGA Senior Amateur champion, Lewis Brown. Lewis's story is phenomenal. It's a great story, and what's pertinent about this conversation is a little bit over a year ago, John started working with Lewis on his transition. Lewis wasn't really happy with the way he was transitioning the golf club. He wanted the club to come in a little bit shallower, and John gave him a couple of tidbits to work on, and it really helped him. It helped him get the club a little bit lower down on plane coming into entry, which we would call the 430 path. Those who are ABS students and familiar with the workings of John and Brad know this concept very well. And Lewis took it to heart, worked on it for a year, and then played in his first tournament in a year in the USGA Senior Amateur, which was on a tough golf course, and he won, beat everybody. So he beat the best amateur event in the world for men that are 55 and over. So, and Lewis's story is great. So I'm not going to bore you with the details here. The details really are enriched and alive in this conversations. It's one of the best conversations I've been a part of. We take it deep. So enjoy this episode, folks. I was an absolute proud participant. I'm humbled and honored to share this with you. And before I forget, please rate, review, and subscribe on any of the platforms that you may listen to this podcast on. And also, this episode is brought to you by Jumbo Max. Jumbo Max grips. Are you curious? Thanks, everyone. I hope your week has been great. And the rest of your week, I wish you nothing but the best, and happy Thanksgiving. Happy holidays to all. And I pray that everyone has a spirit of gratitude and their heart is full of joy. Cheers. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Flaghunter's Golf Podcast. Yeah, this is a good one, folks. We're talking to the founder of Advanced Ball Striking, my good friend, probably my biggest influence in golf. His name is John Erickson. He's been on the pod before. Those of you who are members of the Advanced Ball Striking community know him well, and those who have thought about it or seen it in passing, and you're clicking on to the podcast, maybe this might be a tipping point, because our mutual guest is a very, very special man by the name of Lewis Brown, and he is the current USGA Senior Am champion, who just recently won last month in September as of this recording. So once again, Lewis, thanks for coming on, and congrats to this incredible achievement. Not too many of those that happen on a yearly basis, and you got one of them, pal.
Well, thank you, Jessie, and it's great to be with you guys. And John is nearly a lifelong friend of mine. We met at the Junior World Tournament at Torrey Pines in 1981. So he's a dear friend, and great to be with you guys.
Thanks, Lewis. Thanks, John.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So let's dive right in. I mean, Lewis, you just won and you've got a story before that, which I'm 100% sure we'll touch on. But let's just briefly talk about that magical week and winning the Senior Am championship. I mean, how did you prepare for it? What did you do? And in week, how were you feeling? How did you play? I mean, you obviously played the best, but was your ball striking great through every match? Did you have a cakewalk? Did you have some matches where you were in a dogfight? Let's get right into it.
Well, lots of questions in there. Which one do you want me to address first?
Whichever one you want, pal.
Well, okay. So, normally when someone plays in a big tournament, and this tournament started on my birthday, actually, August the 24th. And, but I had not played a single golf tournament all year. I do run a business. I'm in the investment business, and I got a late start in my business. So, I have no interest in stopping right now. And so, I didn't really have any tournaments on my schedule this year. But I play a lot of business golf. I do work on my game. I've always tried to not let my game deteriorate. But I did sign up for the qualifier because the U.S. Senior Amateur was the one golf tournament that I knew could really move the needle in terms of my, what I've done in the game. My first USGA event was in 1981, the U.S. Junior. I've won tournaments in the state of Georgia, quite a few. And I've won some pro tournaments, done some things. Obviously, I didn't do everything that I wanted to do as a competitive player, but had a pretty good record. Did quite a bit. I was pretty proud of it. But at this point, I'm not really a tournament golfer. I don't go out and play a schedule like a lot of people. So, but there was one tournament that I thought could really, let's just say that motivated me, and that was the U.S. Senior Amateur. So I qualified for it on July the 8th. I did, a few weeks before that, start prepping, and I will say I kind of found a little feel in my golf swing that helped me. And, my first competitive round was that July 8th qualifier. And, when you haven't played a competitive round all year, you're not real sure how you're going to feel out there. There've been times I've gone out and when I haven't played in a while, and, you get a little uncomfortable, a little unsure, a little insecure, I mean, we all feel that in golf sometime. But this time, I was just hitting the ball really, really well, very solid, very straight, and I started making some birdies, and I had a good day, and I made it. So I shot 69 at a course called Eagles Landing here in Atlanta, finished second. So, and the way I played, I just felt like, man, there's some pretty good golf in there, like hitting a lot of real quality shots, putting really well. I've always had a pretty good short game. It's not always on because I don't play all the time, but when it's good, it's pretty good. I can get up and down from a lot of places. So anyway, but the tournament wasn't for 6 weeks. So, for over that 6 weeks, I just tried to do a little something every day, maybe take one day off a week or something. But, I was out in California, playing Pebble, and I played Cypress Point, where you work, Jessie, and that was in June. Let's see, no, I'm sorry, the qualifier was July, so it was like late July, and I went up to see John up in Northern California, and but I told him I was going to be there like 3 days, and I said, "Well, John, I kind of need to find a place to, do a little work. I don't want to go 3 days without practicing or playing." So he helped me get on a course, and I went and played the Green Valley there in Fairfield. And then the next day I found a driving range within driving distance of John's property up in wine country. And it was like a little muni with a driving range. I drove 30 minutes to go there and hit off mats, no grass on the range, but the balls were decent. And, for me, it was just, I would just want reps. I just want to do my routine. I want to see the ball going to my target. and that's all I did, And so all that kind of plays into, the ingredients that went behind me, being prepared when the bell rang on August 24th. And, in match play, sometimes a player who's maybe not the best player can win a match play event because they just beat the people they're playing. But I am pretty proud that I finished one shot back of the medalist in the stroke play on a very difficult golf course, the honors course. 13 over made the match play, top 64. Wow. So I shot one under. It was an interesting 36 holes, but I played pretty solid. And every time I had hiccups and it looked like something bad was about to happen, I would bounce back with something good. And and just maybe to finish that part of your question, I was only losing in one match, and that was my quarterfinal match. I had the lead, and I lost in the back nine, and I was 2 down with 4 to go. I was never down in a match otherwise. And I was able to win 15, 16, and 17. Now, the fellow chipped in on me on 18 to send it into extra holes, and I won in extra holes. So, there were tough matches, but like I said, I was never losing other than that one time.
Wow. What a great week. Wow. That's awesome. The thing that really kind of trips me out, Lewis, is that you didn't play any competitive golf for a year. So, I mean, you were doing something, and this is kind of, I want to lead this part of the discussion and from segueing from that achievement and part of how you got there, because I'm sure when I first heard about it, I thought, all right, well, if there's any two people that can pull this off, it would be you two. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean, given the information that John now possesses and him sharing it with you doesn't surprise me, because folks who are listening, I'm not going to say this lightly. I'm a proud member of the advanced ball strike community, so I have a pretty good idea of what my interpretation is of a good golf swing. And I mean, you don't necessarily have to play great or have a great golf swing to play good golf. But when you see a good golf swing that is structurally sound and doesn't have a lot of any moving parts that are going to go awry, there's a good chance that that person that possesses that golf swing is going to play well consistently. So within that year, you and John started doing a little something with your transition. Let's get into that.
Well, yeah, the last tournament I played, and I still haven't played a real golf tournament. I played a few member guests, this fall, but the last sort of real individual event that I played in was our state senior amateur in September of last year in 23. So I actually visited John out in this property up in the wine country back in last year. I was at John's house in June of 23 of last year, and we swung and hit some at his home in his practice facility. And, I told John what I was working on. I do have a teaching pro here in Atlanta. And I mean, I would consider that more of a collaboration, because I used to teach a long time ago, and I know a lot about the swing. I know a lot about my swing. But then, so I was spending time with John, and he was watching me. And so he, and just to kind of put into a nutshell what I have been working on really for a very, very long time. I mean, like back when I played professionally in my 20s, I had a good enough golf swing to have, won on the Australian tour and got Rookie of the Year. I won in Canada, and, I finished runner up in the California State Open. And I don't know, I think 3 or 4 times, lost a couple of playoffs. I mean, I could play, but there were some things about my swing I didn't like. And particularly, I wanted to get my club on plane earlier in my downswing. And for me to do that, I had to flatten it, and I really had to flatten the shaft. I used to always sort of have a vertical wrist cock, right wrist at the end of my backswing, and which I didn't know better as a kid. That would sort of send the club a little bit across the line at the top. And so I could find the slot late in the downswing, but if I got quick under pressure, of course things could go awry. When my rhythm was good, I hit the ball great. But that was a tough thing to change. I mean, changing a golf swing after many decades is difficult. So anyway, for years I'd kind of been moving in that direction, and I was in the past few years really I was working on it. So when I was with John, we talked about the transition, and he introduced to me this idea of what he calls tripping the shaft, almost pushing up on the handle to make the head of the club go down, which puts it into more of a, for lack of a better term, like a John Rahm sort of position, more horizontal with the shaft. And look, I mean, I have been trying to get the shaft to move in that direction, which was very foreign for how I had always played. But sometimes you just have to make it move a lot to get it where you want. And that's the beauty of having video, because with video, you never have to guess. You can see it because it's all geometry. You can just draw a line. And so, yeah, for me to get the club where I want it, that idea of tripping the shaft really helped me move it more and get it over there. And even now, I'd say it's not something I completely own or feel 100% comfortable with, but I'm getting there. So I played in the U.S. Senior Amateur last year at Martis Camp near Lake Tahoe. I did qualify for it. It was one of two tournaments that I played in last year. I'm sorry, three tournaments I played in last year. And I played well. I was high up. I was highly seeded, in the stroke play. And then in my first match, I really hit the ball well. I was under par and lost to a guy who had a really good day. And I was very much doing the kind of stuff that John talked to me about doing. I could feel it. And, I was sort of aware of the, I was turning to kind of get the club around me, and then feeling the shaft, feeling that move to kind of, and I don't know how much you want to get into this, but when I play golf, and John and I've talked about this, I'm not trying to do it on the golf course a whole lot. I'm aware of it and I'm feeling it. I'm not going to abandon the thought altogether, because if I do, I know that club's going to start working back the way I don't like. And, but yeah, I definitely had that feel out there in Tahoe. And so anyway, this year, I kind of got going, and I feel like I made a lot of progress with it this year. I saw some videos of my swing up there in Chattanooga, and no question that the work I've done to get the club on plane a little bit better has narrowed my window of or my pattern of shots quite a bit, and so yeah, it's been a big help.
Yeah, John. Cue John Erickson. What's he talking about? I know what he's talking about, but my goodness, I mean, I wanted to touch on one thing before you start, and I wanted to just kind of lead into this with you, John, that Lewis said something, you gotta move a mile to move an inch. I think that's important, So thank you for saying that, Lewis. Go ahead, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my journey's been similar to Lewis. I played on the tour and all that. People probably, know my background a little bit, but getting into teaching, I felt like there was a need for advanced teaching concepts. There's a lot of grip stance and posture teachers out there, and a lot of just kind of one swing gimmick stuff. But, my experience on the tour, I didn't really realize at the time, but it was really prepping me to have a better understanding of the golf swing. I was always very curious about the mechanics and the details on what great ball strikers are doing. So that being said, starting the advanced ball striking class and the modules and all that, ultimately, it kind of comes down to Hogan at some point, because I think Ben Hogan was the greatest ball striker. And I think in any sport that you would look at, or any position or whatever, at some point you're going to look at the person that was the greatest, right? So, I've had many good students over the years, want to talk more about, Ben Hogan. So I basically thought, well, I should probably try and really break that down and do a module series based upon what I believe Hogan was doing, swinging the club. Now, this isn't an easy thing to do, because you've got to really get inside that kind of swing. And while I had a lot of elements of that, I didn't have all the elements of that. And it took me really, I've got to say, probably 6 to 8 years to really figure it out, what was going on. And there were a couple things that happened where I just had these kind of aha moments of like, wow, okay, this is in fact what Hogan was doing, particularly at transition and the way he moved laterally and tripped the shaft while the lateral move was going. And it's not something that I was ever taught, and not something that I ever did while I was playing on tour. And also the equipment and everything too. And the whole thing, it's a kind of a complete package. So putting that together, I'm kind of in the finishing stages of, this Hogan module course, which I'll be, getting out here pretty soon. I mean, I've been saying that for a while, but I am actually almost done with it now. So one of the things I wanted to do is just kind of, test out some of these concepts on, with some good players, because this is really advanced stuff at this point. This isn't just, you grip it like this and you extend back and swing through. This is real technical, very advanced stuff. And I believe that Hogan was very technically advanced. And I think a lot of people just don't understand what he was doing, because I think to understand what he's doing, you've got to be able to do it to some degree yourself, to really get inside it. And, I had some big breakthroughs in my own ball striking. So, I ran this by Lewis, and, I knew what he was trying to do. And I thought, well, maybe I should share this with him, because I think this is pretty important stuff. And I showed him, the Hogan transition move, and being a good player, he understood, what it was. The thing that's nice about it is it's actually a mechanical trigger rather than a feel thing. It's not like you're trying to transition the club with some kind of a feel, or, just letting the club, drop by gravity or something, or, taking it way outside and slinging it down behind you. I mean, there's a lot of ways to flatten the shaft, as we know. But Hogan's method was different. And while in the ABS course, I don't particularly teach a specific kind of backswing, because we've seen every kind of backswing work and, win major championships, guys taking it outside and inside, whipping it in and out and upright and flat and, just about everything. I don't really focus too much on that. But with Hogan's method, it's very specific about how you have to take the club back. And I didn't really understand that as much as I do now. Now I'm completely convinced that you have to have an earlier handset to trip the shaft properly. Lewis already had that. So knowing that he had that backswing, he took it a little bit more to the inside, like George Knudson. I thought that'd be perfect to apply. He'd have the perfect swing to work on this. So we, I'd shared that with him, and we spent some time, took quite a bit of video, and just worked on it here. Spent a couple days, and then we went out and played out at Richmond Country Club, and played some golf and just had a good time. Went out and knocked the persimmons around and stuff. But I think, it was a good thing that Lewis was able to have that information and then to apply it. And he had quite a bit of time. So I think he played, you said, he played the one tournament, but almost a year between that and this tournament of time to just kind of work on that and, let it do it the right way, not be in a rush, but just work on it. And you've really got to exaggerate things a lot. I do that in the teaching. It's like, let's just take things to the extreme to try and get the club shaft to maybe move an inch. You move it a foot. You exaggerate something by a foot to over time, after a couple of months, now you've actually moved the shaft maybe an inch or a half inch or something. But golf is a very precise game, and moving it an inch, meaning you don't have to think about it. This is just your natural swing. You just take it back and you swing through, and it's actually, you move the needle, so to speak. And that's my approach towards teaching, is to try and really exaggerate things, get the feel, and then you come back somewhere. So I think, it was clear that that's what was happening in Lewis's swing, because throughout the year, he'd sent me, every month or so, he'd send me some swings, and I'd take a look, and it was like, yeah, I could see that it was happening, and it was improving, and he was getting the shaft and the club head and the club face to where he wanted to have it. So that being said, to go out and just win the U.S. Senior Amateur Championship, I don't think I was expecting that, but it's an incredible accomplishment, and I'm not really here to take credit for it or anything, but I think it probably had some maybe little effect in just helping Lewis get the club to where he wants. There's a lot more to winning tournaments than just having, a great golf swing. You still have to process things, think well, strategize, be prepared and play smart and position the ball correctly. And, there's a lot more to just playing golf and then winning tournaments and stuff. So that's kind of it. And then I know, Jessie, I shared this with you too. And then, you go out and win your club championship by 7 shots and wipe everybody out or whatever. So I think it's encouraging moving forward, just in the kind of a beta testing really of the Hogan modules. I think, some pretty good results just right here. Both you guys have, done pretty well. Even for myself, I had, through the pandemic, I didn't play golf for 2 years at all. My first round of golf was playing with you at Cypress Point, and I hadn't played in 2 years, and went out and hit, 14 greens and a 20-mile-an-hour wind. I mean, I don't think I would normally have done that, but I think good technique is really important for someone that maybe doesn't play all the time. I remembered when I was on tour, I was always impressed by the guys that didn't have to practice a lot. They practiced some, but you'd see a guy that wasn't a ball beater, didn't practice a whole lot. And the traveling is tough on the body and all that, especially on the tours. We were playing a lot of driving, doing like 12-hour drives, 18-hour drives between tournaments. And it's pretty tough on your body. Having good technique, I think, can really help you through that stuff too. So it doesn't surprise me, that Lewis could go out and, play some very good golf. It does surprise me when I won the national senior amateur, just without playing. But then again, having good technique, right? So that's really, really helpful. I think if you don't have good technique, you can practice your way into being a good player, right? You got to keep on it. You got to really be a ball beater and hit a lot of balls and all the timing stuff. The golf swings that are all real timing based. And, you see more ball beaters kind of doing that. But I think more like swingers releases. I've talked about that over time. But I think, Lewis has a real hitter's release and holding shaft flex and accelerating the club through the strike. So all the stuff that I like to teach. I mean, I early on the ABS course and the forum and all that in maybe 2009 when I started it. 2010, I put Lewis's swing up as a model, really. It was like, this is really what I teach, and we put some videos up of him and had a lot of discussion about that, back in that time. So, it's a good stuff. It's good golf swing. And, it's just, I feel blessed to just be a tiny little part of it, I suppose.
I'll say.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, John, that did help me move in the direction I wanted to move into, and I made a lot of progress this year on it, and I do think that concept that you showed me definitely contributed to it. And you're right. I mean, look, it's only one part of being able to perform and go out and play. But having good mechanics, I look at it as every golfer and every golf swing has a window of success. And
some are so bad that window almost doesn't exist. But, but I used to teach, way long time ago, before I went into business. And I would look at like, okay, what is this guy's chance of hitting a good shot? But, when you got really good mechanics, it just means your window of success is much wider, and makes it a whole lot easier to hit the center of the club and hit the ball straight. It still doesn't mean you're going to do it, because you do need to hit the sweet spot. And, all it takes is a little bit of deviation with the club face, and you're hitting it off your target. But so much of the game is mental, as we know. You gotta have your head in the right place to play great golf.
Yeah, probability, like kind of what you're talking about. I think golf is really increasing the probability, of success, whether it's driving the ball in the fairway, hitting greens, putting. And I know we talked a little bit about, what I call the pie chart, and basically if you put a pin in the middle of a circle and you have you divide that into 4 quadrants, long and left, I would call that quadrant the red zone, usually a place you don't really want to be, because if you're in the red zone, your putt for a right-handed golfer is going to be left to right and downhill. So it's harder to make left to right downhill putts than it is uphill right to left putts. So I'd call the green zone would be, say, short right. And so if you can set up your gear and your swing so that your misses end up more in the green zone more often than the red zone, then I think you're increasing the probability for success. And that this move that we're talking about here, flattening the shaft, then it starts to take that left vector of possibilities and you start moving that to the right. And usually when you miss hit a shot, it's because you're not hitting it real solid. So then that ball would tend to fall short and right, which would leave you in easier up and down. Typically, if you miss the green, you're chipping uphill right to left. Or if you're on the green and you've got a 20-foot, 30-foot birdie putt, you're putting right to left. So this is not something that's talked about, a lot in golf, but I think it's a real reality. And to set your game up to where your miss is generally, of course, if there's water short right or something, again, you can play away from this and you could play up towards the left part of the green and your miss might be stiff, right by the pin or something. But this is all strategy and ball positioning stuff. And I'm a ball control guy. That's what I like. I mean, the distance thing, it's good to hit the ball far and all that, but really the way you play good golf is with controlling the golf ball, especially with the wedges and short game putting and keeping the ball in the fairway, especially in a tournament like you just played in a USGA event where there's some rough and, it's big premium on getting the ball in the fairway.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Lewis, how was the course set up in terms of that? Was there some pretty nasty rough?
Yeah, there was. Fortunately, there was a chance you could get a decent lie, but you could also get a really bad lie. I did drive the ball well, but I missed some fairways, and I remember one day on the 5th hole, I hit one right. And I just had to, this was during the stroke play, and I just had to hit a wedge out. I mean, I only probably hit it 80 yards down the fairway. And, but I hit another wedge in there to 3 feet and made par. But there were other times I drove it in the rough and was able to hit, get a pretty clean lie. It was sitting up okay. So I think they were a little bit generous from that standpoint. It could have been worse. Like I say, you can get some really bad lies, but there was a chance you could get a good lie. But the golf course there is hard. I mean, it's a Pete Dye course, and maybe it's not classic Pete Dye like maybe some of the Palm Springs courses, and you do see some of the Pete Dye stuff, but I mean, it is a classic golf course for sure. I mean, it's one of I believe it's ranked in the top 50 in America. But the green complexes are very difficult. And like I said, 13 over, well, I told you earlier, 13 over made match plays. So, bogeys were were really easy to make in doubles.
Wow. That's so cool. What a great story. What a great conversation, y'all. I'm just thinking about all of this, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of segue in and put it all together. I mean, good technique is going to give you, it's just, taking what you've always told me, John, and what you've said all along, is stacking the deck in your favor. And I think that mentally that correlates to a level of surrender when you know from balls to bones that you've earned your technique. You've earned the right to strike it solidly. There's a part of your golf consciousness that lets that part go. That's just like one less thing to worry about, because what you got under the hood is going to hold up. You know that for a fact. And I think that's very valuable. And I mean, hey, that's what all the greats did. I mean, John, you and I talk about this all the time as far as great technique and how it holds up under the gun. And we're celebrating Lewis here, and he's certainly a part of this. But it seems to me that men and women that have had great technique throughout their careers, they never really disappeared. Like Nick Price, for example, if he disappeared, he would finish middle of the pack, primarily because he didn't putt well. But if he putted well, he probably won. But he never went off the radar for weeks at a time. Same with Nick Faldo. Same with a lot of players. George Newton, we celebrate and talk about a lot. His ball striking was a joke because his technique was superior. It was really, really, really good. And if you have that and you've built that within that, letting that's just another part under competition that, especially coming down the stretch, whether it's stroke play or match play, really in your spine that you've got it under the gun. It's really powerful. I felt it this year for the first time, where I knew coming down the stretch in a few tournaments that the fear of losing a ball right or left didn't even enter my mind. It was a matter of, I'm going to hit this thing as hard as I possibly can. And that has 100% to do with, what we're talking about here. I mean, I've been a ABS practitioner for 4 years. I know what it's like to do a lot of work off the golf course, to beat on a bag, to think about it, to think about how to follow this instruction and train the pressures. And this year it just clicked. And then adding on to tripping the shaft, the Hogan modules I've been fortunate enough to have a sneak peek to start to work on them. And I can already tell that there's something different back there in transition, that there's something different. I mean, John, you and I talked about it the other day. Lewis, John and I had this conversation where I felt tripping the shaft in real time. I'm not thinking about it. I don't think about it. I don't have a swing thought. But I felt it in real time. And what was interesting was how much more time I had from the top of the backswing to actually hitting the golf ball. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. Like, whoa, my body's tripping out going, what do I do with all this time back there? Because the transition and tripping of the shaft and getting it back down to, golf machine speak, the elbow plane or the original shaft plane, getting it down that you have at address that combined with the gravity drop, the free ride down in this, now the shaft is coming down into a position where you can hit it as hard as you want. You can let that thing absolutely rip. And now that part of, at least for me, being a student and having this conversation and basically trying to figure out how Hogan did what he did and how is that even in the sphere of applicability, now we have that bridge. And now actually Hogan's swing to me makes the most sense out of everything, even though for years,
It really does.
For years, it was shrouded in this, in this Zen-like Star Wars, mystery that it was just you couldn't quite get what he was doing, and then on top of that, the importance of the equipment too. Like John told me point blank, he goes, "Hey, dude, when you start working on this stuff, you're going to want your clubs to be heavier than they already are." Well, I get that now. I get it. It's to me, it's the more complex that my interpretation of Hogan was versus as it is now, and the applicability of this technology, of this information, it makes the most sense, and it's the most simple. And it seems to, like John, I mean, you and Lewis can probably really edify this a lot more than me, because I'm just at the beginning of this journey. That it just goes with nature. Like everything about it just goes with nature. Like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. Oh, okay. Well, no wonder Ben Hogan would never really hit it bad. He never really would hit it bad. Maybe he might hit a shot or something, but as I see it now, it makes the most sense. So, boys, care to touch on that?
Well, I'm a big believer in, holding shaft flex through the strike. So what is that doing? For one, it's putting feel in your hands. It's putting pressure in your hands. So if you were to take a club and push it against a door jamb and flex the shaft, all of a sudden you'd feel a lot more in your hands than if you didn't do that, right? So it's that feel that's going to give you the awareness of where the leading edge of the club face is at. And also your low point control, club face control, and your path and all that. So that's really critical. Also, the ball tends to respond better when you're holding shaft flex, because now you're hitting it not just with the weight of the club head itself, but you're also hitting it with the shaft. It's like if you hit somebody with a 2x4, right? You're hitting it with a whole board, right? So you're hitting it, holding shaft flex. I think that's the secret of great golf. And that's the holy grail. So a lot of great players have done that in a lot of different ways to do that. So the question is there a best way to do that? We've seen a lot of different ways of doing it. But when I look at Hogan's technique, knowing what I know now, I actually think that from a technical standpoint, it's actually the best way to do it, because it's not relying upon other things that are more difficult, like trying to time certain things or trying to use just a gravity drop at the top, because it's easy to interfere with that. So when you have this mechanical motion, and again, it's not just one thing, because, that's why I'm not a Hogan secret guy, because if you do one thing, you have to do, it affects something else, right? So for you to trip the shaft, it's not just that, because you've got to move laterally at the same time that's happening to make that work, because now you're starting the downswing, you're moving the club towards the ball, but the shaft is flattening. And that's done by the lateral move. And then it's like, well, what's the lateral move? How does that happen? Then you start talking about, stance width. Hogan had a pretty wide stance, as did Trevino and Mo and Knudsen. And a lot of these guys are great strikers that started with a little wider stances. Well, wider stance is going to allow for more lateral movement, right? So why would you want to move laterally? Well, if you move laterally, then you're allowed to save the rotation. So you can start the downswing, start the club and the arms towards the ball, but you're not opening up your torso, you're not opening up your shoulders yet. So we see a lot of that early opening stuff in the modern swings now, where it's, people are really chasing the velocity thing and just trying to get as much club head speed. That's all good for hitting the ball far, but the ball control stuff, it's a different avenue to that. So that's what interests me is, ball control. Hogan would be, one of the great ball controllers. And I would say that, people have asked me, who do you think's better, Hogan or Mo? I mean, I never saw Hogan play personally. I did Mo. I've spent a lot of time with Mo. And I think Mo was certainly the greatest straight hitter, just straight. Mo didn't work the ball. He didn't shape the ball. He didn't draw and fade. He just hit it straight. He just said, "Oh, I don't need to draw and fade the ball. I just hit it straight every time." So there's an argument for that. But then the argument against that would be, let's say that in the Bellata ball era, when we could spin the ball a lot more, and so you had a front left pin placement, and different wind situations, that sort of thing. You might want to sweep that ball in from the right, a pretty good draw into the green, have it hit, and then spin back, and then you can access that pin placement. And I'm talking more with like mid irons and that sort of thing. Of course, you could just throw a little wedge in there, but you're coming in there with a 5 iron or something, and you really need to get it close, and your pin's tucked behind a bunker, and you can't just go straight at the pin. You're not going to be able to, it's kind of too risky that way. So you would just sweep it in, draw it in, have it hit, and spin it back, or a front right position where you hit it, cut the ball in, or if it's into the wind, you're going to hit a lower shot. If it's a back right pin placement, you can skip it in into the wind, you hit a low trajectory shot. And Hogan, he talked about, he wasn't a yardage guy, right? So he didn't play with yardages. It was always about the shot that he wanted to hit. And, they asked him, well, what club do you hit from 150 or whatever? And it's like, well, it depends, right? I mean, he could hit an 8 iron, he could hit a 5 iron. It depended upon the trajectory. Hogan pulled the club based upon trajectory. So if he wanted to come in low, he'd hit a 5 iron, and he would just take a little half swing and just fire that thing in there low into the wind or something with a 5 iron, higher with an 8 iron or 7 iron. So it's a different way of playing golf and not being as obsessed about yardages and this is the club that you're going to hit. And so my point here is that I think this is what separates the really great ball strikers are the ones that can really, really shape the ball, curve it left to right. I think Tiger, didn't he talk about the 9 windows or something when he would practice? He'd hit through the different panes of glass in his mind or whatever. So, and there's technical reasons why Hogan's swing, the way it's set up, would allow him to have that kind of ball control. So, as compared with, say, Mo, where it was just hitting it straight all the time. So both great strikers, but I'm going to say that the ball control guy is going to ultimately come out as the greatest. The greatest ball controller is going to be the greatest tee to green player.
Yeah. Scheffler's doing that today.
Yeah.
Yep. Big time ball control.
Yeah.
Lewis, I'm curious about, we're talking about Hogan and we're talking about this methodology. We're talking about tripping the shaft. Did you really notice, were there things that really stood out when you were working on this and as you were getting it ingested into your own swing nervous system? That was really, did the ball do something differently than before? Did you have more control? Did you have more low point control? Like, what was sort of one of the manifestations that really stood out to you?
Well, I had been working on getting the club flatter and, on playing earlier in my downswing, like I said before. So I think that, the way John was explaining it to me, the idea was that, it was a transitional move. And, he talked about the weight going to the left, but, I already did that.
Yeah, you did that.
So, yeah, I did that. So, for me, it's not like I found new positions I'd never been in before. I'd been able to get the club flat, but this was just an easier sort of trigger maybe, or an easier thought for me. It just helped me. Like I said before, it helped me make a bigger move in that direction. And I liked it being more of a transitional feeling, or right at the very end of the backswing, because, if I tried to flatten it out too much on the backswing, it almost want to steepen back up a little bit, in the transition. So, yeah, that was kind of that was sort of the feel. And I can relate to what you said earlier about how, it feels like you've got time, because that's in this transitional move, the club sort of drops in that sort of transitional move, and then you move into your downswing. You actually start rotating toward the target and accelerating, and so I can kind of feel those dynamics in there, and yeah, it felt good. I mean, I like what John showed me. That it was really helpful.
Yeah, it's been John. I mean, it's undoubtedly starting to take hold in my action, and like I said, something that, and John, you and I have spoken about this, but getting the club and slotting the club. To me, slotting the club and getting, coming in from what we would call the 430 and coming from the inside, rotating through the strike. I think working on tripping the shaft has allowed me to get it down there even deeper. And how that correlates for me is I now have permission to take a rip at it. And I mean, to really accelerate how as hard as I possibly can. There's an element there of I can completely let go of control because the club is now in a spot where I can do that. There's no compensatory moves that need to be made. I don't need to, because I'm coming in shallower, I don't need to slow down my pivot to shallow the golf club, as a compensation. Or am I going to do more hip thrust forward and get the club behind me and stuck, and then pivot stall, you chuck your hands at it, and then it's pot luck. Like, that is all gone on a deeper level for me. And like, as I said before, I'm sure that people that listen have had those sensations before where, you're getting it down there deep and in your downswing. And it's like you can do whatever you want to do with the golf club. But for me, adding to this, tripping the shaft and working on what we're working on has actually allowed me to feel more of holding shaft flex, because my shoulders seem to be infinitely more closed because of the transitional move. John, you mentioned wide stance. It's almost as if my feet want to get a little bit wider. Yeah. Just by nature, to support this really athletic killer move. I mean, it's wild. And I'm sure that if I saw my swing on video right now, I probably wouldn't even be close to how it actually feels. But
it doesn't have to move much. That the thing is, the objective I'm having, working with students coming up with the Hogan module stuff, it's not trying to get everyone's swing to look like Ben Hogan. It's basically taking the core fundamental principles of what he was doing and apply that to each individual's golf swing. And I would say, if we were to start at address, there's a certain way you'd want to set up to the golf ball there, right? And then there's a way that you would take the backswing. You definitely are not going to be taking it outside. You're not going to do that. If anything, it's going to be a pull to the inside, because that makes tripping the shaft easier. George Knudsen's a perfect example. It was always a mystery to me how these guys would pull it way inside, and they get to the transition, and then they'd flatten the shaft again. It's like, because most people, when they take it inside, they want to come over the top, right? They want to go inside and steepen, right? So that was kind of a, mysterious thing for me until I had the aha moment of like, oh, okay, this is what it is. It was just I was just experimenting with some stuff, and all of a sudden it was just like, wow, boom, that's what it is. And applied that, and then tested it out, myself, to make sure that it was legitimate, kind of discovery, at least a personal discovery. Obviously not a discovery because people like Hogan and Knudsen already knew this a long time ago, right? It's like unearthing these artifacts from the past or something, really is more what it is. But so that, that fundamental, there's a certain way you got to take the backswing, and then you got to flatten the shaft at transition, and then the hands are moving, they're moving down to the right hip pocket. When you look at Hogan, his hands were very close to his body at, when I call it P3, or the parallel before impact, his hands are just grazing his right thigh. Newt's the same thing, Trevino the same thing, right? So, that would be a fundamental there, right? And holding shaft flex and accelerating, and the delayed rotation, staying very close, and then accelerating the torso pivot rotation. So that's all moving through the strike, right? So the hips are opening through the strike, shoulders through the strike, right? Not what's happened, a lot of the stuff that's happening now, where it's just like a big race from the top and then everything stalls and you see people's hips going backwards and stuff, the strike, with all the, the jumping and leaping and all the stuff that's going on to try and, use a swinger's release to increase, club head velocity stuff. But this is ball control stuff. So stabilizing low point, hitting into a firm left knee. Hogan never had his left knee locked up at impact, right? There was always flexation in the left knee, and then it was straightened later, right, into the finish. Knutson never even really straightened it, right? Just keep it flexed right on through. Same with Mo, right? That's really good for stabilizing low point, right? So, and turning this around so that the hip clearing is really motivated more by the rotation of the torso. The torso turns, and then it runs out of room, starts pulling on the hip, and then the hip goes, right? So a lot of people are teaching, slam the left foot down, lock up the left knee, get, just anything to just get velocity going. But what happens is the velocity gets too fast. There's over acceleration. As soon as, acceleration itself as a mathematical number reaches zero, then the shaft's going to release, right? So that's happening on the downswing for most people. What we're trying to do is get that to happen all the way down to impact or beyond, right? And Hogan talked about, he felt like he was reaching maximum velocity, 18 inches past the ball or something. Gary Player, every video you see him talking about, it's like accelerate, 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 accelerate. It's like, it's not, this is nothing new here, right? I mean, this isn't some new discovery or whatever. It's just looking back and saying, what do these ball control guys really do? What do they have in common? So when I see Gary Player swing, I see a very Hogan kind of swing. I see Knutson, I see a very Hogan kind of swing. I see Nick Faldo, very Hogan kind of swing. Another thing would be, not a lot of activity with the right elbow going through the strike. That right elbow stays pretty rigid, through the strike. It's not straightening, because you start straightening that right elbow out, it starts closing the club face down. Now you're opening up the left side of the golf course when you do that. So keeping that right elbow rigid through the strike. Now, you're going to lose a little bit of power that way for most people, because that is a power source, but then you have to substitute that. And that's what we do in the advanced ball striking classes, train what we call module 3, increasing the post impact pivot thrust through the strike. So you exchange that, you pick up the rotational speed and lock up the elbow for the accuracy, because we want the ball control. We don't want to give that up, right? So that's basically, those fundamentals that you would want to see. And then, of course, moving through the strike, you'd see Hogan, if you're from a down the line view, you see his hands just disappear real fast behind his body, right? And the club face stays looking at the target a long time. And you see that angle between the shaft and the left forearm is a big angle, right? It's not, there's no handle raising, right? His hands never go up like a lot of players do. I'm not even talking about address. I'm just talking about the handles. We're actually raising up through the strike, and Hogan would be the opposite. If anything, it was just doing the opposite of that. It was almost compressing down into what I call a heel heavy divot. You feel like you're taking the heel would be hitting into the ground first rather than the toe raising, which then, then the whole flat lie angle thing, you get into that. And, I've got a lot of discussion about the advantages. Again, it's not necessary that you play, super flat lie angles, but you're tipping the hand in your favor. You're definitely, because flatter lie angles are going to help keep the ball out of the red zone, right? So, and as well as help you just engage the pivot rotation and the torso rotation, because the flatter the club is, the more your body just naturally wants to turn, around that. If it's upright, you tend to start swinging up over your head and down, and it's a lot of arms and hands going on, and not as much body, right? So all these things combined, if you look at what Hogan was doing, he kind of had everything really correct. I mean, I just look at that. I don't really think there's anything I'd change. Everything looks like it was very well engineered, almost, just the perfect kind of engineering job. And then, there's an argument that Hogan was the greatest player that ever lived too, because if you look at the percentage of like even his major championship wins compared with other people, you know, the tournaments that he won, majors that he entered, and also in that era with Hogan, there were tournaments back then that were actually majors, like the World Championship of Golf at Tam O'Shanter. That was a major championship back then. And it's not considered a major because, you know, people weren't really talking about majors that much back then, right? In the Bobby Jones era, you know, like the US Amateur was considered a major championship, right? So you have these different eras, right? So you have the Hickory era and Walter Hagen and Jones, and, you know, you could argue Walter Hagen was the greatest golfer, you know, with what all the tournaments and major championships that he won. So different eras of golf, and you know, things are different now, but I think the physics haven't changed. You know, the laws of physics haven't changed. What mass does, lie angles, you know, what we're talking about with Hogan with shallower entries, what Mo was doing. The laws of physics haven't changed. And I think everybody would do better with better ball control. So that's just some thoughts.
I agree. Boy, Lewis, you want to add on that? Masterclass.
Well, John's the guru. I'm not. No, but he's a smart guy, and people should listen to what he has to say. I know that. And he's studied these guys a lot. I do look at a lot of the modern swings, and you know, I know there's, you know, I do kind of like the idea of the three imperatives of the golf machine. Yeah, I mean, I like to think, you know, there's really just three things you have to do, you know, really to be proficient. You know, there are preferences for how to do things, but, you know, where I go to practice with the teacher pro I work with here, he's got some old sequence photos, and he likes to show Raymond Floyd next to Miller Barber, because, you know, they were the opposite in their backswing.
Yeah, right.
You know, Floyd he sort of tripped the shaft on his takeaway, you know. Mm-hmm. And then Barber was the other way. They were like 180 degrees difference, but then they ended up at the same place. And so that's kind of how I like to look at it. But I do I like the fact that John has studied this, and he understands the physics and sort of the dynamics of what makes it work, and those are preferences. You know, but there are different ways of getting it done. I think, technically speaking, and like we said before, it's just that you want to make that window of success as wide as you can. You know, so then you can just go to the golf course, like you said, Jessie, and trust it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very powerful. I mean, you know, whoever's listening to this, I mean, this really it's really kind of proof in the pudding that, yes, there's preferences that we have, like you said, Lewis, and the possibilities and the working on your golf swing in a way that, you know, has been proven time and time again, you know, from the best. You know, for me, at least as a student, that has been so valuable, because I could just keep telling myself, hey, I'm working on this stuff because it worked for Scotty Scheffler, or it worked for Miller Barber, or whoever, you know. Mm-hmm. And knowing that has really inspired me to continue on this really remarkable and enriching journey of creating something that is not only unique to me, but something that I can be very proud of. And having it show up when you want it to, or, you know, when you need it to, especially under the gun, it's really a joy. It's to me, it's more fun to be able to hit a golf shot than get it up and down. It really, I mean, not that getting it up and down isn't necessary. It certainly is. But to hit like a 5-iron from however long when you need to, and you stuff it because you made an incredibly proficient golf swing when you needed it to. I think about Hal Sutton, be the right club today, right? I mean, how good was that shot? Well, his action was really good. And having that and working, having the information and working toward that and then having it manifest it's really hard to put into words. I mean, I know that you can identify with that, Lewis, as well.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. It's worth it. 100% worth it.
One thing I'd like to touch on with Lewis, I know you worked with Bob Rotella a lot and on the mental side of things, and we talked about that as well. And some of the things that he talked to you about are just really staying present in the moment, right? Out there.
Well, yeah, that's sort of a common thread probably amongst, any sort of performance coach. But I worked with Bob way back, when I was playing in my 20s, and then, and more just recently, or say the last 6 years, when I started back playing some tournaments, I've had some conversations, spent some time with him, and I think a lot of it, especially for people who are analytical, like all of us are. I think it's, if you really want to get the best out of yourself, out of your potential, it's learning how to turn the brain off, and or at least learning how to make, I'm not sure that was accurate, but let's just say putting it in the right place. It's not like it's off, but the conscious mind maybe goes into a place like Bob has talked about Steph Curry, and he's such an amazing shooter from way out, and he actually does drills. So he has some drills that help him react to his target. They sort of train him to react to his target and not have conscious thought. And so that's sort of the paradox of all this. Is like we're talking about all this stuff that we want to be doing technically, which is good. We're all saying it's the window of success. You want to have it, but performance. But when you go perform, you've done the work. It's like, okay, that's the reason you do the work, so that when you go play, it's there, and that's when you go play, you have to trust it and let it go. And golf is a unique game in that it's there's a lot of time to think about things, and it's not really a reaction sport like basketball or tennis. So yeah, but there's a lot, to it. I mean, with performance, yeah, it's being in the present, but it's also about just not getting too caught up and worried about the outcome, which we're all, I mean, that's just our human nature, is everybody cares about the outcome. But you watch the best players in the world when, they care about the outcome, but they're so into what they're doing that, they're not stressing over the outcome. They're very much tending to their business. And that's what you said about staying in the present, just, focusing on what's in front of you and not thinking about pars, birdies, and bogeys and 75s or 65s.
Yep.
Yeah, thinking about, I always go back thinking about Mo because I spent so much time with Mo. But, you saw Mo, Lewis, when we were up in Canada. And remember how he would just rapid fire golf balls, right? He'd line up 6 in a row and just go, he'd have 3 balls in the air at the same time, And,
yeah, well,
I think that there's to that.
He was hitting golf balls like Steph Curry shoots basketballs.
Yeah. And I think he was training himself to do that exact thing, just to get the mind into a different place. You don't have time to think about anything. If you're just, ball target, boom, 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 you put your brain into a different place. You don't have time to be thinking about standing over the ball and like, okay, what am I going to do here? Where's my backswing going? Or what am I trying to do? You just ball target, boom, the ball's there. There's a ball on the ground. Now the ball's in the air. Ball's on the ground, ball's in the air. Ball's on the ground, ball's in the air. And Mo played very, very fast, right? So I think there's something to that. of the reaction sport, kind of bringing that element into golf. I think Trevino looked like that a little bit. You get over and you just do a little foot shuffle thing, tap the club behind the ball, just send it on its way. He just made it look easy, right? As compared with some players who are just standing over the ball forever, and they're making it look like it's a difficult thing, as compared with the guys who just get up there and think, okay, time to hit the shot. There's the ball. Here I am. Step into it. And I know we talked a little bit too about, Mo was really, he never stood behind the ball and looked at the ball to the target. He didn't believe in that. He said golf is played from the side, so he would just come in from the side and hit the shot. He'd never get behind it. And I get behind it and look. But I think it's interesting, these different approaches, right? Like what you were saying, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Yeah. And those commonalities are the things that I really try and focus on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lewis. Were you going to say something?
No, I didn't really have anything to add to that. I think John makes a good point, and I mean that's a lot of what I think Rotel and some of the others are trying to get guys to do. You do all your work, and then there's a time to go trust it and let it go. And it's tough in golf because golf we hit even the best players hit so many shots that are not good shots and or not what they want. Right? There's no perfection, so you have to. I mean, Rotel's first book was called "Golf Is Not a Game of Perfect,"
yep,
and it was very appropriately titled. So if we get, and I've been guilty of it. I know that it's just my nature, and I think that's part of what's making me better is not trying to be too perfect. Just that's why it's good to have a good short game. You don't have to hit great shots all the time, and you don't have to figure out why you hit a bad shot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
that's that's the beauty of it. We're still finding ways to get a little better, even after all these years.
Yeah, such the allure of golf too. Just you always want to get better. That's so well said. Everybody can identify with that. Were you going to say something, John?
No, I was just saying. One of the things that helped me out mentally, was having good technique and being confident in that. And I did practice the rapid fire thing a lot after seeing Mo do that, working with Mo a little bit on that kind of concept. I would go out and just line up 5 or 6 balls and just fire boom, 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 and just work on that. And doing that, it really does put your mind in a different place. And then once you start realizing that you actually hit the ball better by doing that, rapid firing them, you hit one good, and that feeling is right there. You just bring it to the next ball, bam, good, right there, bam, good, bam, bam. You want to have that approach. So you pull the club out of the bag. You've got your shot in mind of what you're going to do, whether it's a little draw, a little fade, high, low, whatever the shot. And then knowing what that feels like in the body, I know that if I'm going to hit this kind of shot, it needs to feel like that. So I might take a little practice swing. Okay, that's what I want it to feel like. And then boom, get over the ball, tap, 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 send it on its way. Committing to that feeling of what it is you're trying to do, 110%. Just completely commit to it, and then just back away and say, I just live with the results. I gave it 110% hit. It went at the pan, it went in the bunker, wherever it goes. But the best chance of a positive outcome is to commit 110% to the shots that you're going to hit, commit to it, send that thing on its way, and more likely than not, that ball's going to end up more or less where you want it. The key to good golf is not having a lot of horrible shots, right? It's the horrible ones that, you can get by with some mishits, but you don't want to be just mapping it, 2 fairways over and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What's really helped me, gents, since we're on the topic of staying in the present moment and accepting, I love that first Rotella book, Golf Is Not a Game of Perfect, was just a phenomenal book. And I also like the sort of the credo in my head of perfect is the enemy of good. And sometimes a good shot might be a mishit, and you only in retrospect did your subconscious maybe save yourself from certain disaster. But I think also too that, one of the gifts of really trying to be in the present moment, just like what you said, Lewis and John, giving yourself 110% commitment for that shot and living and accepting the outcome. One of the fruits of that for me has been to also recognize and notice that, we're human beings. We're going to have negative thoughts. And not so much for me is to deny those negative thoughts, but to not become attached to them. That's been a big revelation for me. And I really attribute that for me to my meditation practice, having that extra second for my conscious mind to say, okay, I don't need to, that moving on. It's just like a cloud in the sky, moving on or changing the channel. I don't have to accept that thought. And that's been a great gift to me, but it really has been a big part of working on, this whole thing blends together, gents, as you know. But the attitude, the awareness in the present moment, being 110% committed to the golf shot, if you could do all of those things, it's really going to allow all of the work that you've done to even come through even more, because you're not mentally interfering with your golf swing by either talking yourself out of the golf shot or making a dumb play, which you shouldn't be making. And then you have some conflict there. And for me, this stuff, while knowing that what I've been working on for the last 4 years is true and technically sound for me, is allowing me to access both sides and have a sort of a mind-body coherence, which has been probably the greatest gift for me and a big realization this year, just kind of adding on to it. But I still like, in closing this thought, Tiger Woods has this process. I've said it many times, and I just think it's so incredible that after he hit a golf shot, he'd give himself a 10-foot radius to do whatever he needed to do. Throw a fit, throw a tantrum, draw an F-bomb, say some pretty derogatory things to himself like he did. But as soon as he got out of that 10-foot circle of the previous golf shot, that shot was gone. The energy of that shot has completely left his body. So he's able to 110% commit to the next shot. And you can argue and say that Tiger and Nicklaus and Ben Hogan probably were the greatest focusers of all time. That there's no way they could have done what they did without this level of concentration. But that's attainable. If you know what to do, it's like that's attainable, and having a very technically proficient golf swing is also attainable, in my opinion. That's my soapbox.
Yeah, it can go deep. Yeah.
Yeah. And this conversation is more toward the better player. The better player is going to identify with this. This is sort of an extension of ABS. And one thing I also wanted to circle back on in closing that loop is Lewis, not letting the conversation go by the wayside of not only celebrating your incredible achievement a couple of months ago, winning the Senior Amateur, but also a couple of the personal challenges that you had to overcome. And, knowing you and knowing your story a decent amount, you've traveled a long way and traveled and it's been a long road to hoe. And here you are coming out the other side of it. Just kind of give us a little bit of a background and what you've dealt with over the last few years and what you've overcome and how you've overcome it.
Well, okay. Thanks for that. It is sort of part of the story of my recent success, and I guess in winning our state senior and then the US senior tournaments, is that back in 2017, and I at that time I wasn't really playing any competitive golf, but I was still playing golf, and like I said, always sort of trying to keep my game from deteriorating because I enjoy playing and played business golf. But anyway, I got diagnosed with neck cancer, came from a virus, HPV, and it's not that fatal. So I was not too worried about it killing me. I mean, there was a chance of that happening, but the doctor said, we know how to treat this and you're going to be fine. But, it was 7 weeks of radiation and then some little chemo. And, so after that, it's tough treatment. I mean, it's a lot of radiation, does a lot of damage. And, I came out of that, and let's see, that was January of 2018, and I won our state senior am in 2020. So that was, that was really, I don't know, maybe it's probably one of the most gratifying wins I ever had. Just that I was able to bounce back from all that and win a tournament against a bunch of good players. And the way I played had something to do with that too. I led it from wire to wire. But then I had, I also, when I came out of the treatment, I had a car accident that really could have probably almost ended my golf. And it would have. I had nerve damage from it, and I couldn't lift my arm. So I was saying to myself, this is worse than cancer, because I was diagnosed with the nerve damage, which caused my trapezius muscle to not function. And so my shoulder blade had fallen, couldn't lift my arm. I could swing a little bit and play, but it was going to get progressively worse. And it was painful. And the doctors in Atlanta, I was seeing the best doctors at Emory Hospital. They didn't have anything for me. So through my own efforts, I found a guy at Mayo Clinic who had the surgery that, it didn't fix the nerve damage, but it fixed my dysfunction with the trapezius muscle. It's kind of complicated, but anyway, I bounced back from all that. And then, even the last year or two, I've had some issues from the radiation causing some other nerve damage. It's had some effects on me. It has some effects on my eating and so forth and swallowing. But I don't know. I kind of look at it like that stuff just kind of makes you tougher. Or I guess you can just roll over and let it get to you. But maybe in some way it has maybe a little more determined with the golf. I don't know that for sure, but I do think it makes me pretty determined that I love playing golf, and if I'm going to go play a tournament, I want to be my best. And deep down, I've always kind of, or at least since I quit playing many years ago, competitive golf, I've always thought, well, I wanted, I would love to go back and see how good I could get again, and even though I don't play a lot of tournaments, I still am driven by that idea of, let's see how good we could get. And you really have to do it in a tournament. I mean, it's one thing to go tee it up in a money game and make 7 or 8 or 9 birdies or something, and shoot a low score. But it's like a friend of mine said, there's a lot of guys who can throw in the bullpen, but you got to go do it in the game. And so you got to do it in a tournament. I mean, you got to go shoot the scores, and you got to follow them up, and you got to play under pressure. And so that's, for me, I can sort of kick back now, and I'm not that I'm done or I'm going to rest on my laurels at all, but I can be pretty proud and fulfilled of what I've been able to do. And like I said, the health stuff, it probably just made me a little more determined. I mean, I'm pretty good now. I mean, the shoulder works pretty good. I'm at probably 80% there. I don't have cancer anymore. I do have some effects from all that, but there's a lot of people worse off than me, and a lot of people had a lot worse cancers than I did, and that's kind of how I had to frame it. It's like, man, I could have, I have colon cancer or brain cancer. I don't have that. I've got something I can manage through. So yeah, that's that story. Hopefully I didn't drag it out too long.
It's great.
No, but that's it's a great thing to come back from something like that. I mean, and a little bit of a parallel with Hogan too, right? Had the car accident and came back and played some of his best golf. Even myself, when Vic Wilk and I ended up in Canada and sent us home for 8 months, with back damage and stuff, and I came out and was able to win the next year. I think it does sort of give you an added little focus, like, okay, it puts things in a perspective that you didn't have before, right? And I think when you go through some hardship and you just, sometimes it can help you just get a little more focused, when you come back. So I think there are probably a lot of things here that attributed to it, probably some things you're not even thinking of, maybe like what you eat for breakfast every day or something. You just, a lot of little things.
Well, there are a lot of elements that go into, accomplishing something, and you can't go win a tournament like I did if you don't putt well. So like,
we haven't even mentioned putting, but that's got a lot to do with it too.
I think that's a little bit to do with it. So, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
you've always been a good putter, so that's that you putted well.
I've always putted reasonably well. I would say it's really more of I feel like an advantage for me now. I feel like I have an edge on the greens a lot more than I used to.
Yep, that's a good superpower to have.
It's not. Yeah, it's not there every day though. Some days they just don't go in. And it's like kind of like we talked about with the full swing. You can't let a bad shot or a bad round or a bad putting round, change your confidence or what you think of yourself. And that's what you're talking about with the acceptance of when you hit a bad shot. It's like, or Tiger reacting. Well, if you react in a way that's going to make you question yourself the next time, then that's not a good reaction. That's why the best thing to do is just throw those bad shots away. They're going to happen. Geez, in golf, it's like if you're half of an inch off or a quarter of an inch off or maybe even a centimeter off, you're probably going to hit a bad shot. So, just accept it. And, but if you're talented, you have good action, you're going to have some good ones, and enjoy your good ones and find a way to score when you hit a bad one. And then, when you get done with your round or with your tournament, then, if you don't like how you're hitting it, then go do something about it. Go get better.
Yeah.
So, the mindset stuff is, it's equally as important, really. I mean, all this stuff. That's why golf's a beautiful game.
Yeah. What did Hagen say? What was his allowance per round? 7 bad shots. He said he used to give himself 7 bad shots before he got mad or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard that, but I kind of like it. So think about it. If you have 7 bad shots, then you can be pretty patient out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and if you're a good player, are you really going to hit 7 full swing bad shots? Think about it. If you're a good player, that'd be a pretty bad day if you hit 7 bad
hopefully
shots.
Not often. Yeah, hopefully not often, but some days when you're off, you will. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah,
it depends on how you define as a bad shot, but
right, right.
You want to use all in the first 2 holes, right?
Yeah.
I used to play a lot with Alan Doyle, and a bad shot for him was like left side of the fairway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I kind of like that. I like it too. Hagen said he gave himself an allowance of 7 bad shots. And then the thing that changed for Hogan was he said he got better when he stopped trying to do many a perfect thing. I think that was his quote, end quote, something like that. So here you got two of the greatest players of all time telling you that you're going to hit some bad shots, that it's part of the game.
Yeah.
Mistakes are a part of the game.
Knutson had the great comment, you got to, give up control to gain control.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a, you've got to just be slightly reckless, when you're hitting your shots. You know what I mean? You got to give up control. You can't be just boom, just step into that thing, give up control, just take a rip at it and, send it on its way.
I like that.
So,
slightly reckless.
John, I've told you this, John, but Joe Durant, who plays on the Champions Tour now, he's a friend of mine, and Joe's always been, one of the top ball strikers wherever he played, PGA Tour, Champions Tour. Total driving, it combines distance and accuracy and greens and regulation, all that. And he told me, it's like, I think it was maybe 2 or 3. He said, he figures every round he's going to hit maybe 2 or 3 shots that he goes it's an outlier, almost like what was that? It's like an accident. Yeah, it's like an accident. Maybe it was 2 shots around, but I may be overstating it. So, I mean, I don't see him hitting many of those, but every now and then, like anybody, who's hit one, like, what was that? Well, it's just an accident. So, most people, or at least human nature, will be like, well, why did I do that? Well, it didn't do any good to do that. It's like, well, it's just part of the, it comes with the game, like if you hit 100 shots with a 5-iron, a certain percentage of them are going to be shots you would call an accident. It's like, well, that's really not what I do. That was just sort of like an accident, like a foul ball, So when it happens, you just have to put the club in the bag and move on. We're spending a lot of time now talking about the mental game, but I think for the audience, that's very important, for performance, and hopefully that shot doesn't put you in a place, where you're OB or it could, though, it could be something like that. But you just have to realize that that's part of the game. Everybody's going to do it. And you're never, and that's back to the golf style game of perfect. No matter how much work you do, you're not going to prevent that from happening. You're going to hit some of those. But hopefully it's a small percentage and not a big percentage.
Yeah. Well, gents, I can't tell you how enjoyable this conversation has been for me and how enriching it's been. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience. And Lewis, once again, congratulations for your incredible accomplishment. And thank you for sharing your story and your thoughts. And we hope to do this again. I certainly wouldn't want this to be a one-time conversation.
Well, it's fun to be around people who love the game, and it's fun to talk about it. So I appreciate the invite, and we kind of got down into the weeds, but for golf lovers, I think that's what they like.
But
absolutely.
Just one thing real quick here before we go. Now, you told me a statistic about yourself that you're the only player that you won the Georgia State Junior, the Georgia State Amateur, the Georgia State Open, and the Georgia State Senior Amateur. Is that correct?
Well, I've won all of those except for the Junior. I did not win that, but I won the State Amateur. I won the State Open. And I won the senior amateur. I was told when I won the senior amateur that I'm one of 3 people who've ever won the state amateur and the state senior amateur. I don't know that anybody's ever won those 2 and the state open. I don't think they have, because it is, in order to do it, you have to turn pro and then turn amateur again.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's something to not be that proud of. But it's probably not too many people had a chance to do it. But I've been at it a long time, so I had a lot of chances, and was able to win some, thankfully.
Yeah, well, that's it's an incredible
Unreal.
career down there in the state of Georgia. That's for sure.
Unbelievable.
We're a pretty strong golf state. You know, one thing we didn't talk about tonight, but I'm the fourth different Georgian to have won the U.S. Senior Amateur in the last 11 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's strong.
Yeah.
Pretty strong.
We got a pretty strong state. It's a great golf state.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Well, gents, thanks again for coming on, and I'll make sure to put all the pertinent information in the show notes that for those who are listening, particularly those who are interested in advanced ball striking, I'll make sure to put the forum support and website up. And guys, thanks again.
Okay,
Thank you, Jessie.